Tonight, in a packed Capitol Hall, President Donald Trump gave his State of the Union address, and it was definitely one of the most consequential speeches of his second term. But look, this was far from your typical run-of-the-mill speech. It landed right in the middle of a national firestorm over tariffs, government funding, and really the whole direction of the country. So let's break it down. What he said, what he didn't say, and what it all actually means.
And that's really the big question here, isn't it? What were we really watching? Was this just a president checking a box, fulfilling a constitutional duty, or was this a carefully calculated move to shape the political battlefield for the entire year ahead? As we're about to see, this speech had some serious strategic implications that go way beyond that podium.
All right, so before we dive into the nitty-gritty of this particular address, let's just quickly set the stage. What exactly is the State of the Union, and why does it carry so much weight every single year?
So yeah, it's a constitutional tradition, but in today's world, it is so much more than that. Think of it as a president's single biggest tool for casting their vision, for laying out their agenda directly to the American people, and for firing up their base. I mean, it's one of those rare moments where a president has the undivided attention of Congress, the Supreme Court, and millions of us watching at home.
Now, this speech did not happen in a vacuum, not even close. It was delivered against this backdrop of some major political flashpoints that absolutely shaped every single word. First up, this huge government funding battle. A partial shutdown has put funding for the Department of Homeland Security at risk. And this isn't just some bureaucratic issue in D.C. We're talking about things that directly affect federal workers, border operations, and frankly, public confidence in the government's ability to even function. The pressure was on.
So how did President Trump tackle this head-on? Well, he laid out three very clear demands: end the shutdown, fund border security, and prioritize national safety. Simple enough, right? But critics were incredibly quick to point out that while the message was clear, the speech felt like it had more rhetoric than a real concrete bipartisan plan to actually get it done.
And the other major issue looming over the speech was the economic fallout from the administration's really aggressive tariff strategy. After slapping duties on imports from major trading partners, the Supreme Court recently shot down the president's use of emergency powers to impose them. And that has cast this long shadow over markets, manufacturers, and global trade deals.
Now, what's so fascinating here is how this slide just perfectly captures the two competing stories. The White House was framing their tariff strategy as this vital economic independence mission. But on the other side, you had a lot of lawmakers and business leaders who were getting nervous, asking for a much clearer roadmap for future trade policy, because they were worried about all the instability it was creating.
Okay, so with all that context in mind, let's break down the core themes of the address itself. What were the key pillars of the president's message on the night?
He really focused on four main pillars, which we're going to walk through one by one. The economy, of course, border security, America's role in the world, and a call for unity.
First, the economy. This was a huge point of emphasis, as you'd expect. The president boasted about record-setting stock markets and low unemployment, giving all the credit to his administration's tax and trade policies for what he called resilient economic growth. Strategically, this is all about framing the economic story to build voter confidence, especially with the midterms on the horizon. The second theme was border security. And no surprise here, Trump doubled down on this signature issue. He used that powerful line, "Stronger borders mean a stronger America," to frame the whole debate. He backed it up with some emotional stories and data, which we should note his critics later challenged, all to make this forceful argument for more funding. This move is designed to energize his base and define the immigration debate on his own terms. Pivoting to the global stage, the third theme was a pledge for a much more assertive American foreign policy. The speech signaled a tougher stance on rivals, he specifically mentioned China, and he also addressed the ongoing conflicts in the Middle East. This is all about projecting an image of strength, a core part of his political brand, and drawing a very sharp contrast with his opponents.
And finally, there were these moments, sprinkled throughout the speech, where the president called on lawmakers from both sides of the aisle to come together for the good of the country.
Now, even though you could visibly see the partisan tension in the chamber was still sky high, this kind of call serves a strategic purpose. It projects a presidential image and sort of places the blame for any division on the opposition.
So, how did it all land? Well, as you can probably imagine, the response was immediate and sharply divided. Let's take a look at the reactions from across the aisle.
It was really a tale of two speeches. On one side, you had supporters in the hall cheering the president's strong stances on national safety, the economy, and American pride. On the other side, the opposition was criticizing what they called empty promises, basically arguing the speech lacked any real legislative clarity on how to solve these huge pressing issues of government funding and tariffs. And beyond the instant applause or criticism, political analysts were pretty much all on the same page. This speech was just the opening shot. The real battle begins now, away from the cameras, in the committee rooms and Senate hallways where policy actually gets made, and of course on the campaign trail for the upcoming midterm elections.
And this brings us to our final and maybe most important section. Why does this one speech matter so much in the grand scheme of things? Well, because it wasn't just a recap of the year. It was a strategic political play for everything that comes next.
The speech really served four key strategic functions. First, it sets the agenda. It forces Washington to debate on the president's chosen turf, the economy, immigration, and national security. Second, it's a test of his relationships, not just with the opposition, but with members of his own party in Congress. Third, it signals the White House's messaging strategy to voters. And finally, it connects those really complex international trade fights directly to politics here at home.
And so all of that leaves us with this one central question to think about. Was this a powerful and defining moment for the presidency? Or was it, in the end, just another political speech that raised more questions than it actually answered? The speech has set the stage, but the next act is still to be written.